make easy the adoption of Bitcoin and what are the trade-offs. The panel is named Adoption Technologies, Benefits and Trade-off. It will be hosted by the one and only Shinobi, that is a really great Bitcoiner, and I think that many of us already learned a lot from him. And also remember, if you are looking this through the live stream, you can donate some sats to the cause of adopting Bitcoin and to the cause of the Bitcoin country, because we are here enjoying the conference, but there is a lot of work to do, and the resources are not that big, so it could be really great if you can donate some sats to the cause. And remember that the conference is just starting. Tomorrow we are going to have a lot of fun here, and there is a lot of things to happen yet. If you guys are ready, I will let you with Shinobi that will introduce the panelists, and that's it. Choo!
Hello, the hardcore few.
Can go on?
So I guess today we're going to be talking about adoption technologies, the benefits and the trade-offs. I have with me Obi from Fedi, a company that's going to be building on the Fediment technology Eric Sirloin is working on, and Nicolas from Galoy, obviously got everything kicking off here in El Salvador. So I guess kind of the gist of what we're going to go through is blockchains don't scale. If you tried to throw the whole world on the Bitcoin blockchain transacting, it doesn't work, which is the whole reason people have been building out solutions like Lightning Network, things like Galoy, like Fediment, because that base technology Bitcoin is built on, while it is censorship resistant, while everybody can self-custody their own funds, it's simply not scalable to the whole world. And so in trying to make Bitcoin a technology stack that can actually reach and be used by a good portion or the whole world, you kind of have to make some trade-offs. And there's a lot of benefits that come along with that, but also potentially some downsides. I think kind of the simplest way to start off thinking about this is the scalability of transactions. Like both Fedi and Galoy, the whole reason for the project kind of being somewhat or partially custodial in nature is it's a lot more scalable for people to transact. You could have potentially thousands of people on a wallet like Bitcoin Beach wallet or on a Fediment instance ran by a couple of people transacting on a daily basis, and none of that ever has to actually hit the blockchain. So that's something that can go very far in terms of how many people can use it, but it's not quite the same as self-custodying your own keys on the main chain. So I guess if Obi and then Nicolas, you guys kind of want to go through your thought process and the trade-offs in terms of scaling benefits but downsides there.
Yeah, well, thank you for that, Shinobi. I think it's the first time on stage with Shinobi and Obi, so we're making progress. Right now, if you don't do anything, you have a default thing that happens. And so we want to get as many people as possible self-custodying. So doing first-party custody where they own their own keys and they're their own bank. For most people in the world, currently it's too technically complex, too expensive, or they're just too afraid to do it. And for various technical reasons, if we do not want to increase the Bitcoin block size, which some people think may not happen, I'm of that view. And I'm one of the people who thinks that you could potentially in time have smaller block size.
Fight me.
Pardon?
This is
Fight me.
But that's a different discussion.
This is contortion.
But if at some point you will have to have another option that's a layer 2 scaling option or even a layer 3 scaling option. Right now, the default scaling option is to use exchanges. They are the layer 2 scaling. In fact, I was just watching a podcast, a video podcast with Elon Musk and Jack Dorsey and Steve Lee. And in Elon Musk's vision of the future, it's going to be this Dogecoin multi-gigameg block-sized future using Starlink to connect people. And then layer 2 is a series of exchanges, i.e. would be the scaling layer. Now, I don't know about you, but regulated exchanges handling the vast majority of transactions of 8 billion people on the planet makes CBDCs look like the most libertarian thing in the world. That's an incredible Orwellian nightmare. And so in that process of getting people to self-custody, we think there's this middle ground that both Galoy and Fedi, which is powered by FediMint, have hit upon. And the idea here is instead of one layer 2 or a regulated series of regulated layers or exchanges, you have hundreds, thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of, in our case, FediMints, each one run by communities, by the most trusted elements of the communities on behalf of the community. So in that sense, it's effectively this sharded solution, but hundreds of thousands of shards, each one running applications that are appropriate for that community.
I guess, Nick?
Yeah, I think it's interesting to think about first principle, right? Today, blockchain layer 1, Bitcoin can do maybe 3 transactions per second, 4 transactions per second. And so the next stage in scalability is layer 2. There is multiple solutions for layer 2, but the one we are working at Galoy is really Lightning. I think it's the most promising technology to scale Bitcoin to the next level. And there is a lot of upside to Lightning. Now you can do instant transaction. It's something you can't really do with layer 1. Like layer 1, you have this probabilistic model. You know, your transaction may take 10 minutes, 20 minutes, sometimes more. Yesterday we had a Binance consolidation, and now we have like, I don't know, 1 or 2 days of transaction in the mempool. And so if you send your transaction 1 sats per byte yesterday, maybe it will take 3-4 days to actually be confirmed, right? So like the timing of layer 1 is unpredictable. Lightning solves a lot of things for day-to-day payments. The main one is you can do almost instant settlement. Like this is the biggest part that Lightning brings, but also the scalability part. Now you can do a lot of back and forth with your peer, and this is great, right? You don't need to wait for block confirmation. But Lightning have some downsides also. One of them is like you need to be always online, unlike if you do layer 1. Another downside of Lightning is now you need to open channel. What opening channel means is you still have to use the layer 1, and you have to do transaction when you open, and maybe this channel need to be closed for different reason, and you have to do another on-chain transaction. And so, although Lightning scale Bitcoin in some big ways, we still have to interact with the layer 1 chain. And one of the challenges that Lightning has is that although it scales several order of magnitude further Bitcoin, we still have to interact with the layer 1, right? And so it might onboard 10, 100, maybe 1,000 times more people than if we use layer 1 chain. There is still some scalability limits to use Lightning for everyone in the world. One of the limits is also that it's expensive to do this on-chain transaction. And so maybe if you're like living in the US, if you're living in Europe, like maybe the $10, $20, $50 to open this channel and close the channel is fine. Like you can pay for it. Maybe in El Salvador, like it's an issue, right, to have these upfront fees. And so the solution that I guess we're working with Galoy, and it's also the model of Fedimint, is okay, it's how can we maybe go one step further? I know it's really about sharing an UTXO. Instead of like owning an UTXO, which of course it's awesome, you know, it's like you have your own key and like you're very self-sovereign. Is there a way to think about, okay, I'm going to share this set of UTXO, such that like now we can have a pool of people transacting from this UTXO, right? And it's one way to scale further. Of course, the first way that scaling UTXO has been done so far is the exchanges model, where like sure you have like a bunch of UTXO on the exchange, and then you can go to the exchange, you know, trade it, and you can move the BTC around in a ledger. Basically, the BTC never moved really. It's just that who owns this UTXO on a transaction change over time, depending of where you buy it, or how you buy it and how you sell it. But the point that, yeah, this scale, right? I think the type of solution that we are working with is today, it's how can we go this exchange model? Today there is maybe a couple of dozen exchanges in the world. They are all closed source and they don't really scale, like they want to be big and centralized. And I think the way we look at this is we want to bring open source software so that like anyone can launch their own micro exchange, micro wallet in a way that, you know, now you can have maybe 10,000, 100,000 or 1 million wallets in the world, such that it's maybe each wallet is still a custodial wallet, custodial model, but if we have 1 million of them, like it's a lot better decentralized network than if we have only 10 exchanges in the world that control all the Bitcoin.
And that number's going down. If you went back, so I ran an exchange for 8 years, and if you went back 4 or 5 years ago, there was probably 30 or 40 exchanges that were responsible for 90 to 95% of the world's usage. Now, with the latest news, we're probably, well, actually one exchange alone does more volume than every other exchange in the world combined right now. And that percentage of market share has just only increased. With the latest numbers, it's up at sort of 70 to 80% market share, one exchange. Because liquidity begets liquidity. And so when you're running an exchange, there's these incentives to centralize more and more volume on one place. So this is a viable way of getting people off exchanges, and you have the ability from a functionality point of view to add features and so on. So Galoy recently added stable sets. So you could extend these systems with functionality that some other platforms might call DeFi or so on, but you could add functionality to that, microfinance, lending to these platforms. But whenever you want to make a payment, if it's internal to that community, it happens off layer 1 and off the layer 2, the Lightning Network. And when you actually look at it, for most people around the world, even in the West, this is a global thing, the vast majority of your payments are going to be within your community. You're paying for the rent or your accommodation, that's a local payment. You're paying for your fuel, you're paying for food. You tend to do this locally anyway. So most of those transfers can happen at this sort of communal wallet level. And then when you want to buy something, a Netflix subscription or something from a neighboring community, that would go over the Lightning Network. And then when this is a blue moon, someone in the community wants to make an on-chain transaction, that can happen again.
Yeah, so it kind of just takes and acknowledges the scaling limitations not only of the blockchain but of Lightning itself, and just extends that and starts to try to synergize it with the natural flow of money in an economy. And
yeah, and something that I think is very interesting to understand also is that the traditional banking system today is also made with layer, and probably most people don't realize it, but if you look at the US dollar payment system, we have a layer 1, which is called the Fed wire. It's basically the Fed is creating money, and they have this payment system. Who have a bank account on this Fed wire is a bank. And the bank are like the layer 2, and on top of it, you have like Visa and MasterCard that settle eventually to the Fed layer. to the Fedwire system. And there is really the same system of layer today in the banking system than what Bitcoin is today doing. And it's for different reasons. The reason for why Fedwire today have this payment system is because today it's hard for the scale to, for the Fed to onboard everyone on Earth on their system. So they're saying, okay, we are only going to onboard banks to our system, and the banks themselves will be responsible for onboarding on user, right? It's layer 1, layer 2, layer 3, right? And then on top of it, you have Visa, MasterCard, and then you have this inter-settlement system across bank. And the same layering system that is in the banking system, I guess, is also what we are building today with Bitcoin layer 1, Lightning layer 2, and the custody scalability solution on top of it that we're building.
Yeah, but obviously the major benefit and difference between that arrangement in the banking system and Bitcoin is completely open access.
Yeah.
Anybody who can acquire some Bitcoin can interact with that base layer network. Anybody who can then acquire that Bitcoin can open a Lightning channel. And anybody who can open a Lightning channel with access to open source software like Fedimint, like Galoy, can actually run their own system on top of that like that. And instead of this very strict permission system where Fedwire decides who is allowed to use Fedwire, the commercial bank on top of that is in charge of who is allowed to use the commercial bank, and then Fedwire indirectly, anybody can plug into this system, and it's completely universally compatible.
Yeah, I mean, anyone can do that today. But at scale, when we have 8 billion people using Bitcoin, it may not be possible, assuming everything else stays the same, which is one of the immutable features of Bitcoin. It may not be financially possible for anybody to do those things because it could cost hundreds or thousands of dollars to perform those transactions. So that's when you're at scale. If you look at a world with 8 billion, and probably by that point it might be 9, 10 billion people using Bitcoin, it becomes very clear that the vast majority of people's transactions and interaction will be something that's similar to Lightning, or if anything, even simpler and quicker and lower cost than Lightning. And then very few people would be performing the on-chain transactions.
But even in that environment, though, it's simply the market and the cost that is kind of the gatekeeper or the barrier there. There's no person intentionally deciding who gets access, who doesn't. Like, if you can afford to pay the cost, you can interact with the network.
It's not censorship that's preventing you access. It's not a gatekeeper. It's not a ruler that's preventing you access. If you can work hard enough or you're innovative enough and so on, you can access the Bitcoin network directly, which differentiates from every other system and mechanism out there. It also provides you a number of guarantees, and part of that does give you, and people are actively working on resolving this, but those lead to privacy challenges, which people are working on. So another thing that layer 2s can add is a level of privacy that you can't at least currently get on the base layer. So in the case of Fedi, which is built on the Fedimint protocol, it includes as standard support for the Chaumian eCash privacy protocol, which is next year will be a 40-year-old technology proposal. And that provides for a level of cryptographically near perfect privacy as standard without you having to do anything. So privacy is the default, and it's the easier way to go is to be private than to be non-private in that world.
And so I guess, kind of one of the biggest challenges in kind of scaling out Bitcoin this way, especially if you want the ideal distribution and decentralization of as many, tools or services like this as possible, is security. Like, if you really want there to be, hundreds of thousands, potentially millions of little instances of, Fedimint, groups or people running software stacks like Galoy. Right now, even if you've been in this space for a long time, like you're relatively technically competent, running something like a Lightning node can be a bit of a headache. Like there are security concerns there with the private keys having to be online all the time. So one of the biggest challenges I think here is going to be making that as simple as possible, even for relatively non-technical people, to operate these things safely, especially given that other people's money is going to be on the line. So Obi and then I guess Nick, like what are your thoughts about how to kind of approach that problem?
Yeah, security is a hard problem. I mean, the first thing is, I guess this is why we are proponent of open source, because if you have an open source framework and like it's used by 100,000, 10,000 community organizations, and they're most likely to look at the code and make sure there is no security hole. And so I believe over the long term, the open source solution, even for exchanges, will be what they will be looking for, because it will be more robust, more battle tested than a closed source solution. But operating a Lightning node today is, I think, fairly challenging. I think we have seen over the last months, there has been 2 incidents over the Lightning networks that made it that if you didn't update your node in the following hours, you could lose money, right? And it's, I guess it's an interesting insight where, like, if you're someone that's just running a node with a Raspberry Pi and expect you can just run it and that's fine and nothing will happen, now you have to reassess this assumption and you have to assume that either you have to be on top of it and you need to be able to access your node at all time, and you have to have the technical competency to, if something happened, to update it or change things like on short notice. You can't just go to holidays and come back 2 weeks after and expect that it will be fine. I mean, of course, we want this to be easier, better over time, but I guess the event last month showed us that we still we have some way to go before we make it easy to run a Lightning node. But actually, this probably made the case for both, what we're developing, which is like maybe not everyone needs to run their own Lightning node, but you can have some people that are technically competent and then can run, whether it's a Fedimint instance, whether it's a Galoy instance, and they can help onboard a larger community. And provide the technical support, the developer support for it.
Yeah. So again, when we looked at this at Fedi and Fedimint, we looked at how other systems build for scale, and you tend to see you build in layers, and that's any system. If you're building a house, it's building layers. The foundation, you don't put wallpaper on the foundation, or Wi-Fi on the foundation because it's doing the job of a foundation. Then you have bricks, and then you have levels, etc. But the other thing that happens is if you build for scale, you have specialization and separation of concerns. So in the case of the Fedimint sort of vision, Fedi vision, you'll have Fedimint, which is handling the task of community custody for a community. That task requires a higher level of trust. And therefore, it's important that we want to make sure that users who are doing that task are very trusted members of the community, and we also make sure that task is as simple as possible for them to do. So the experience of running a Fedimint node is actually the same or simpler than the experience of running a Bitcoin node, i.e. you need to do nothing to it once set up. Setup will take 10 minutes, and you then just keep it fed and watered with electricity and internet, and that's all you need to do. Your job is to not touch it, basically. However, when it comes to running a Lightning node, that is a complex task, and that's a business, and it generates revenue. But it's possible to provide a Lightning service to a Fedimint in a way where the Lightning node needs to trust the Federation, but the Federation does not need to trust the Lightning node. So it can be provided to the Federation in a trustless manner. Because it's trustless, it can be revenue generating, and if it's revenue generating, people could do this as a commercial enterprise and earn money from it. Yeah, because the Federation doesn't need to trust you. And in fact, because of the nature of the way community custody works. You can have multiple people connected to federations, etc., at no increasing cost to the federation. Therefore, what we expect to happen is commercial organizations be set up that already exist. There's many maybe in this room and this conference who can provide Lightning services to federations in a trustless manner. Now, all these Lightning transactions they will be able to charge fees on, as is normal when running a Lightning node. And at some point, when they need to make an on-chain transaction, even if it costs them hundreds of dollars, it's okay because they would have earned more than it cost them. It just becomes a cost of doing business. So that can be more complex because it's run by commercial entities and it can be done in a trustless manner. The other thing is, what we expect to see happen is we will be integrating with many service providers who make it easy to run nodes. So it will already be relatively simple to run a Fedimint node, and there'll be a talk later on today showing how to do that. But we're going to look to make that even simpler. So if you have things like Umbrel, Raspberry Blitz, Start9, Nodall, and so on, we'll be looking at Nix Bitcoin. We'll be looking to integrate with all of these. So downloading a Fedimint will be clicking, downloading it, and then just saying how many guardians in your federation, what are their public keys, done. That's the end goal for the federation side of it.
I think one of the additional risks is the work pool risk, maybe like the FTX risk, or however we want to call it. And it's a hard one because if you want this type of and I think here the risk with whether it's Galoy instance or Fed instance is very similar. Is okay, you're actually giving up on your UTXO, right? You don't have your key. You're using, at the end of the day, you're delegating this key access. And how do you make sure you are giving your Bitcoin to a trustworthy entity? A regular question that we have been asked, for the Bitcoin Bit wallet, which we operate, is okay. There is this multi-sig Bitcoin wallet in the backend that stores the Bitcoin. Who controls the Bitcoin? And it's a very interesting question because it's like an exchange. When you have an exchange, you're like, do you want to say who is the owner of the key? And here we just say, it's like people in El Salvador, and more specifically people in El Zonte, and they own the key. But do you want to identify those people? If you identify them, then the issue is maybe they become, they have extra attention, on their shoulders that they don't want, right? And maybe you don't want to identify them. But then if they are anonymous, then it's also, it's easy for them to do a work pool, right? And this is a very interesting element to figure about, to think about. The solution for the Bitcoin Bit wallet today is it has been incorporated as a company, and it's operating legally in El Salvador. And so now, there is a legal entity that is behind it. But it's an interesting aspect to think about, how do you, who are those custodians? Do they want to be known? Do they want to be not known? And there is some very interesting trade-off about this.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of experimentation there. So it's a global product, but some of the interesting areas in terms of that question are in the global south or in post-Soviet regions that are under the yoke of authoritarian regimes or dictatorships. And in those regions, I came from a conference in the World Liberty Congress, for example, in Lithuania just before here. They don't want to they worry about being known by the authoritarian regime they're in, for example. So the solution there is the federation are run by the human rights defender groups or activist groups that support these federations. So, for example, Voluntad Popular in Venezuela, they have offices in Europe and US. They're running the federation for the people in Venezuela, for example. Or when you have a village and you have the diaspora who are sending money home every month to their family, Well, they're great people to run the federation because why would they steal the money that they're the ones who are giving them the money, for example? So we're seeing these solutions coming up, and different communities are coming up with different ideas. We have BitNob, who creates a Bitcoin exchange in Africa and Kenya, and they want to provide a lower cost form of custody. So they're looking to make a federation with BitNob and in a local national church in Nigeria, because church is quite big there, and a law firm as well, and they're forming a federation that way. So different people come up with different solutions, but if we have a choice between, if you go to an exchange, even if they have 1,000 employees, they're going to have 5 to 7 people who are actually trusted to custody their million users worth of $1 billion worth of Bitcoin. And they are people who work in a commercial organization who are motivated by taking your money and you're giving them your money, versus you've got your community that you've known throughout your entire lived experience, who are people that you've known through your life, and you're choosing 5 to 7 people there now, and you're using your own innate wisdom of your community to decide who are the most high integrity, who have proof of integrity, proof of community service, and proof of passion for the community. Out of the two, I and many other people know which one they'll prefer to choose. And it's not the first one.
Yeah, so it's fundamentally the exact same thing. It's just how tight are the social connections between the people involved? Like, are they just a business owner in the middle of nowhere, or somebody you actually personally know?
Yeah.
Well, I guess, I don't know, we're running down to the last 60 seconds. If either of you have any kind of closing thoughts on the matter.
Yeah, maybe something we don't talk about, but I guess the way I think about Galoy and Fedimint, you know, how they are similar but different. I see Galoy as something that is a clear ledger solution, and I see Fedimint as an encrypted ledger solution. And I know something we wanted to touch on is, you know, regulatory, I guess, framework and what's the impact on, the type of product we are doing. And it all comes down to, like, okay, are you operating a clear ledger or an encrypted ledger? And it's probably, at the end of the day, target different audience, I think. The encrypted ledger is like privacy by default. You know, there is some use case where it's very relevant. The clear ledger, there is some other use case where it's relevant, like if you want to have maybe access to the fiat banking system. You know, your banking partner will be asking you for a normal ledger, and this is the type of solution that maybe you may want to favor. But yeah, I'm not sure we have the time to dive into this, but
no, I don't
maybe another time.
But I would say 2 things. One, recent events that are still unfolding let us remind us that if you can, get your money off exchanges. And right now it's difficult for many people to do that, and solutions like this hopefully allow people to do that. I think at global scale, it is our view that at global scale, with 8 billion people using Bitcoin, whether it's self-custodial or whether there's another blended or community custodial solution, privacy is paramount. And you don't want a world where one company has the details of 1 billion customers. We worry about CBDCs, but that's the equivalent or even worse, because at least there are, in most reasonable jurisdictions, there are mechanisms to replace your government. But if it's a company, it's effectively an oligarchy.
Well, I mean, you can't escape the trade-offs. We should just strive to have the best ones available for people to pick and choose from. But, you know, thank you, Obi. Thank you, Nicolas.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for having us.
Thank you.
Hey, where are you going?